All right, very good morning, everyone. I hope you're very excited to now listen your fellow colleagues, students, the presentation, which is the third in the series now. Here we are going to discuss about different proteomics applications, how you can creatively utilize different softwares and open access tools to analyze the real mass spec proteomics data set, and then trying to make biological sense of that or clinical sense of the data. And from the very static information in the Excel sheet, how best you can bring in or bring out the most dynamic biological information. So in this slide, today now we have 5 presenters, which is Devanshi, Dhanush, Diti Priya, Jyoti and Piyush. And format will be same. We will have your recorded video to be presented here. Presenter should be available online. After your 15-minute presentation, I will ask some questions around 3 minutes. Parallel to that, in the chat box, questions will be asked by other students. Participants should reply for that. So let's first start the first presentation from Devanshi. She's mainly going to talk about the Cushing's disease, how that can be compared with the control sample to understand biological alterations. This is one of the very important pituitary disorder, and really, omics investigations or understanding the detailed biology of these tumors are still quite challenging and still quite lacking. So therefore, it will be very interesting to see like what interpretation Devanshi is able to make from the data set. So I'm going to start the first presentation, and then we'll have the question answer.
Hello everyone, I am Devanshi Gopani, a first year MTech Biomedical Engineering student. The topic of my today's project is global proteomic analysis of Cushing versus control samples to decipher biological alterations. To start with, I would like to give you a brief intro on what is Cushing syndrome. It is a potentially lethal disorder which is characterized by endogenous hypercortisolism or by the synthetic glucocorticoids, which are administered therapeutically for any number of diseases. The ACTH-dependent cortisol excess accounts for 80% of Cushing syndrome, occurring primarily due to pituitary edema, which is also called Cushing disease, and rarely due to an ACTH secreting or CRH secreting extra pituitary tumor, that is ectopic Cushing syndrome. The evaluation of endogenous hypercortisolism is done with late night salivary cortisol or a 24-hour urine-free cortisol test. The hypercortisolism due to Cushing disease or adrenal tumors or ectopic tumor, that is in case of the tumors, it is the best treated way is through surgical resection. On the basis of ACTH levels, Cushing syndrome can be further classified into ACTH dependent and ACTH independent. These pathways are categorized on the basis of the pituitary, the tumors that are present, that is on the basis of pituitary tumor and non-pituitary tumor. High ACTH level Cushing syndrome occurs, and on the basis of adrenal overproduction of cortisol, low ACTH level Cushing syndrome occurs. Then I started with my analysis part. First of all, I took my data to MetaboAnalyst and I did my data integrity check, where I obtained the following information. That was in regard to the samples, peaks, the pairing, the grouping, and the missing values. My data had 0 missing values. For normalization, I did it by median and then I did log transformation. Then I obtained score plot that was using PCA and PLSTA. I could observe outliers, and after removing them, I had normalized my data again, and I then obtained the correlation heat map. Through correlation map, I could observe that my samples were highly correlated to each other. Apart from this, I could observe that the samples being correlated to uh, the samples being correlated with themselves. Apart from that, some of the samples were correlated with the other samples, which depicted that the multicollinearity existed within the samples. Then I obtained the heat map. Through heat map, I could observe that the proteins which were downregulated in a control state were highly upregulated in the disease state. This was vice versa for the other proteins. That means I could observe a pattern within the map. Also, I could see that within the samples there were wide range of heat. There were wide range of peak intensities, which depicted that there was a diversity within the samples, which was widely occurring due to the heterogeneous nature of the tumor. Then I obtained the VIP plot. Through it, I could observe that my top 15 features and their states in normal and in disease state. Then I did statistical analysis, which was using fold change and t-test. I kept my, for fold change, I kept my threshold as 2 and I obtained my significantly downregulated proteins, significantly upregulated and unsignificant proteins. For t-test, I kept my parameters as the group variance was unequal. The p-value threshold was 0.05 and I obtained the following significant and insignificant proteins. Next was for the volcano plot. I kept my threshold as 2, p-value threshold as 0.05 raw, and the group variance was unequal. And I obtained I could obtain the significantly upregulated proteins and significantly downregulated proteins. Then using the top upregulated protein from the volcano plot, I observed it in the box plot, and through there I could observe that the protein which was top upregulated, that was P31639, which is sodium glucose cotransporter 2, is highly expressed in Cushing syndrome. This was also found in the literature, where it was mentioned that persistent hypercortisolemia frequently impairs glucose metabolism in patients with Cushing disease. Then I took my significantly upregulated proteins, which I got from the volcano plot, and did my string analysis. After doing k-means clustering and obtaining the protein networks, I could obtain the following pathways that were matching the KET database. Then, using the normalized file from the Metabonalyst, I did my GSE analysis in Reactome, and I could observe the top 10 pathways from there. Then, using those significantly upregulated proteins from the volcano plot, I did my reactome pathway analysis, and I could obtain the following significant pathways. Then for the biological interpretations, I could observe that from the reactome pathway analysis, the non-sense mediated decay and eukaryotic translation were the pathways that were frequently observed, and so I carried them forward for the biological interpretation. For the first pathway, that was a non-sense mediated decay, it is critical for RNA quality control, and it plays a vital role in recognition of premature termination codons in transcripts, as well as in regular homeostasis of transcriptors. It plays an important role in cell cycle regulation, cell cycle viability, DNA damage response, while also serving a barrier to virus infections. Any disturbance in this pathways can lead to neurological disorders, immune disease, and cancers. The role of NMD pathways in tumors is highly complex, and this is because it can protect against the disease as well as it can aggravate the disease phenotypes. It all depends upon the nature of the mutation that triggers the NMD pathway and the type of the disease itself. Thus, it is very important to understand the underlying mechanisms, and this might lead to new ways to use this surveillance pathway in cancer therapy. The second pathway which I obtained was eukaryotic translation. Translation is a process of protein synthesis, and it is one of the most complex processes in the cell. It is a multi-step process which comprises of initiation, elongation, termination, and ribosome recycle. The regulation of this process may play a prominent role in most of the processes in the cell, and it is critical in maintaining homeostasis within the body. The eukaryotic translation initiation factors, which are generally involved in the initiation step of the translation process, they are linked to the PI3K AKT mTOR pathway, which regulates the cell cycle. The PI3K signaling pathway plays an important role in cell growth, proliferation, and survival, making PI3K inhibition an attractive target for anti-cancer therapy. Studies are being carried out to characterize these intracellular signaling pathway and how it impacts in the pituitary adenoma growth dynamics. These are the following references which I have used in the presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Devanshi. So I think you try to decipher some role of various protein involved in the Cushing syndrome. So are you available to take some questions? Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. So I think your data looked pretty good. It was no missing value, which was quite good. Reduce your lot of task of doing the combinations for doing missing value imputation. But nevertheless, the the way you did probably transformation and normalization actually median you tried, that did not look so uniform, despite the data being so good. Did you try other ways as well? And this was, I'm hoping, it is log2 data, right? Log2 transform data. You're not audible, Devanshi. Please unmute.
Sorry, sir. So actually, I tried scaling part as well, but sir, I could not find particularly, but like data was not seeing like it was not being seen like that good. So I just left that scaling part, and I
So
just
did
did.
not come at Gaussian finally, did not, because it was not very Gaussian, right? It was still skewed slightly.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and when you made one observation which was very good in terms of within the Cushing, also you made some pattern, which is like subtypes, right? Yes. So there are two groups might be emerging over there. If you were to prove this hypothesis or test this hypothesis, what will you do the next set of experiment to find out, whether indeed the Cushing, what we think may not be one disease, but may have different subtypes within the same disease?
So actually during analysis also I found some of the pathways which were not upregulated in my the reactome pathways which I got. So I would like to find analyze my samples in such a way so that I could get more information regarding the data set which I was given. So right. I could differentiate between.
Let me just get back to the same question. You showed a heat map when you showed that, okay, within the expression, within the Cushing also, some are highly upregulated, some could be down as well, right? So you anticipated that there might be two subgroups available within the Cushing also, as compared to control. Control was very different. So now if you were to test out that in Cushing there are two subtypes exist, what will be next set of action and your experiment to be done. You did mention briefly some part of answers is correct, which is ideally you need some clinical information of these patients to look into that. But let's say you did figure out that there is kind of diversity there. What is the next set of experiment you can do?
So just I could
yeah, given the short time, I think I'll give you a hint finally, because it is more hormone dependent stuff, ACTH, you're measuring those. You'd like to measure those across all these group of patients. Do you see some differences within those, right? Also, you can do more targeted analysis based on these protein to find out are there real changes happening, and can you really take some sample blinded and try to start doing those subtype analysis. Also, many times even looking at a specific phosphorylation analysis or other PTM analysis may also reveal better heterogeneity among the patients and better subtyping. Now, my last question, given the time was already up for you, you mentioned about one protein which was sodium glucose transporter, right? Co-transporter 2 protein. What is the exact role of this protein and how you think it is important in the Cushing syndrome?
So actually, from the literature, I found that during Cushing disease, this protein is highly upregulated. The task of this protein is to they are present in the kidney in the PCT, and their task is to reabsorb the glucose. So actually, in the case of disease state, they are getting highly upregulated, and there is a dysfunction in the protein, and thus the glucose levels are getting highly the level of the glucose is getting high in the body.
All right, the thing which you can continue to think more about, essentially like this finding, how this could be relevant in context of Cushing. If one would like to take this finding forward, because the changes were really huge, how well you can utilize this information towards better therapeutics or in some way for patient treatment or better patient management. All right, that will be food for thought for you. So thank you. I think we are now going to move ahead with the next presenter. So let me share my screen again and let's go to the next presenter now. All right, so next presenter is Dhanush. He's going to talk about oral cancer, which will bring a new information for a different type of tumor. As some of you are already aware that this is one of the highest prevalent cancer in India, and with a lot of tobacco chewing and people's different food habits, oral cancer is still one of the major challenge in India. So it will be really interesting to see what Dhanush is able to decipher from this data set.
Hello everyone. I'm gonna talk about deciphering the biological alteration in oral cancer tumors comparing with the control samples by deep proteomic analysis. What is oral cancer? Oral cancer is abnormal, that is uncontrollable cell growth in any of the regions of the buccal cavity, including cheeks, gums, palate, tongue, lips. This uncontrollable growth of the cells leads to the formation of ulcers, lesions, red patches called hemoplegia, white patches called leukoplakia, and lumps and bumps in the mouth, which causes pain even during swallowing. The major risk factors include the alcohol consumption and tobacco chewing. Even human papillomavirus infection causes oral cancer, along with rare cases of UV radiation from the sun exposure causes oral cancer. This oral cancer can be diagnosed by the tissue biopsy, by differential diagnosis. And the treatment of oral cancer include the techniques like surgery by laryngectomy, glossectomy, laryngoscopy, esophagoscopy, neck dissection, and other methods include radiation therapy and chemotherapy. Prevention of oral cancer can be done by avoiding the risk factors, that is the chewing of tobacco and alcohol consumption, and getting the shots of human papillomavirus infection by virus vaccines. oral cancer constitutes about 30% of the overall cancers and 85% of the head and neck category cancers. Among this oral cancer, more than 90% of the oral cancer is oral squamous cell carcinoma, which is the cancer of squamous epithelium lining the buccal cavity or tongue. Analysis involves the proteomics workflow, where protein content from the tissues is extracted, then digested, then ran through mass spectroscopy analysis, then the raw data is generated. This raw data is analyzed using MaxQuant to generate a CSV file containing the protein intensities. For our project, 10 control samples from the healthy individuals and 10 tumor samples from the cancerous tissue in deceased group who are addicted to chewing of the tobacco was considered, and the proteins were extracted and underwent MS or MSMS analysis to generate the raw data. This raw data consisted of 2,401 proteins overall in 20 samples. This CSV file is further taken for analysis using MetaboAnalyst, which is a web server tool used to analyze the MS data. Then statistical analysis is done for the CSV file, which contains the protein peak intensities. The general check gave that 40.5% of the values were missing. For this, missing value imputation was done to avoid any difficulties in the analysis. And the threshold was set to 40%, and the remaining missing values were estimated by KNN feature-wise algorithm. Then the data was filtered using interquartile range. This filtration of the data is done to remove the undesirable variables. Then the normalization of the data was done by median. Then transformation of the data was done by square root transformation, and the auto scaling of the data was done. Then this normalized data was analyzed by principal component analysis and partial least square discriminant analysis, which gave sample 6 and sample 17 from tumor and control respectively, as outliers. So for further analysis, these samples of the parameters were set to normalization by the median and square root transformation and auto scaling, as it gave a Gaussian curve, good Gaussian curve, compared to others which gave a narrow peak. Then the fold change analysis was done to identify the differentially expressed proteins in tumor with respect to control. The fold change analysis threshold was kept to 2, and the other test, t-test, two sample t-test was done to identify the significant proteins from the insignificant proteins, depending on their expression. Grouping these two analyses was the volcano plot, which gave 72 significantly downregulated proteins and 88 significantly upregulated proteins. The correlation analysis among the samples was done using Pearson algorithm, which gave the negative correlation between the tumor and control group and showed a slightly positive correlation between the same groups. And the heat map showed the expression of each and every protein in the sample. Further processing of the data, for which the normalized data after removal of S6 and S17 was generated as a CSV file, which is taken for gene expression analysis by the reactome, and the other volcano plot data containing significantly upregulated and downregulated protein was taken for gene list analysis by Reactome. Reactome is a peer-reviewed, curated database containing of the proteins and their associated pathways. For Reactome gene expression analysis, the input was the normalized data from the MetaboAnalyst. Then this CSV file was analyzed by camera algorithm, which was similar to classical gene set enrichment analysis, for which the samples were annotated with respect to control and tumor group, and tumor group was compared with respect to control group. And these are the protein IDs which were upregulated and downregulated. And it gave the top 25 regulated pathways along with the image which showed the effects of these proteins in different metabolic systems. Among these pathways, collagen degradation, keratin sulfate biosynthesis, heparin sulfate metabolism were of importance. Then Reactome gene list analysis was done on the top and down regulated, significantly top and down regulated proteins in volcano plot. It also gave 25 top regulated pathways, which include neutrophil degranulation, platelet degranulation, Roche GTPase signaling cycle, along with an image which showed the effects in different metabolic systems. The darker the region, those top most significantly upregulated. Then string. String is a tool which is used to cluster and form the interaction between the proteins. The interactions were set to 90% confidence from the data, and the clustering was done for 4 clusters using k-means clustering algorithm. In both the cases, the cluster with more proteins was ribosomal proteins interacted with eukaryotic translational initiation factors. Then the top upregulated and downregulated proteins from the volcano plot were selected, and then their corresponding names were obtained from the UniProt, which is a database. And for the top regulated proteins, the literature survey was done. Plectin, one of the top regulated protein, is a cytolinker and a scaffolding protein, which has emerged as a potent driver or a potential biomarker for malignant human cancers. It is involved in various cellular activities in tumorigenesis, cell proliferation, adhesion, migration, invasion, as well as signal transduction. The plectins interact with many interactors and bring about cancer-specific mislocalization to the cell surface, enabling it as a potent oncoprotein. Plectin shows interaction with RAC1, resulting in regulation of the PKC signaling and modulation of the proliferative MAPK-ERK pathway, which are also the signaling pathways of cancer. Removal of plectin from the fibroblasts resulted in decreased SRC and FAK signaling, inhibiting cell migration of the cells. And plectin affects the Rho signaling pathways as a regulator of actin filament, and is involved in signal transduction. Along with the other effectors include proto-oncogene for calmodulin, PIP2, Nesprin-3, and integrin beta-4. These evidences show that lectin is involved in cell proliferation, survival, migration, and invasion of the cancer cells. Keratin proteins, another set of proteins which were overexpressed in oral squamous cell carcinoma cell lines, showed that its depletion leads to decreased migration, invasion, metastasis, and cancer stemness in OSCC cells, and also enhancing the lysosomal degradation of the beta-5 integrin and c-Met, which are involved in cancer signaling pathways. Keratin 16 interacts with SRC protein, which initiates the signaling to STAT3 protein, which has a main role in metastasis, cancer stemness, and drug resistance of the cancer cells. Ezerin, another protein which functions as a cross-linker between the plasma membrane proteins and the actin cytoskeleton, is involved in functional expression of the membrane proteins on the cell surface. These integrate with pro-guanosine triphosphate called GTPase signaling to regulate cytoskeletal organization by sequestering pro-related proteins. These proteins act as kinase for anchoring and sequester pKa close to its target proteins, and their effective phosphorylation and functional regulation. ERM proteins, that is erinacin protein, along with radixin and myosin, play an important role in membrane transport for electrolytes through ion channels and transporters. Caveolin 1, a protein which functions as a regulator of signal transduction, also play a vital role in vesicular trafficking events like transcytosis and endocytosis. Its role in influencing the actin cytoskeleton, cell polarity, angiogenesis, and membrane fusion also enhances their importance and metastasis. In metastasis, pathogenesis, cell transformation, tumorigenesis. It also has an important role in regulation of the intracellular cholesterol homeostasis and lipoprotein metabolism by controlling their plasma levels as well as their lipid composition. In conclusion, if any protein is differentially expressed in cancer cell lines and are involved in signaling pathways as shown in figure, bring about cancer cell differentiation, invasion, proliferation, metastasis, and their survival. As a result, they can act as a potential biomarkers of the cancer cells. Thank you. These are the references.
All right, Dhanush, you are there. We can talk about your presentation.
Hello, sir.
Yes. Yeah. So ideally, I think overall, I have checked your time. It was still around 15 minutes, which is good. Although you gave a lot more time on the analysis part and result interpretation part, as compared to the how you did the data analysis. That was more in the summary way. Somewhere in between, I'll just set up the timer for 3 minutes for in the beginning, somewhere you had interruption in the video. It was not very clear about the correlation plot and data normalization. Can you a little bit explain on that?
Sir, in the correlation plot, 5 of the tumor samples showed negative correlation with 3 of the control samples, and the remaining samples were correlated to each other, like the belonging to the same group, showing a bit of positive correlated.
Mm-hmm. So, and then the way you did normalization, that looked pretty good, but what was the strategy used?
Sir, I tried with different parameters, like I tried with log transformation, even the cube root transformation, but all the others showed like uh, narrow peak of the curve. Like it was not normally distributed. So I use the spark transformation as well as auto scaling along with normalization by median.
All right. Coming to your biological interpretation, you had difficulty in reading a lot of pathways which were on the screen. That font was very small. Can you list at least the one top pathway which you think is very important in oral cancer from your finding?
MAPK ERK pathway, which is also called as a RAS-RAF ERK pathway, sir.
And I think probably Agerin is one of those which is linked to that. You had talked about some protein role. Which proteins are that?
Plectin, sir. Plectin.
Plectin. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, given that now let's say you have understood some of these protein, especially caveolin and plectin and Agerin. Do you think that some of these proteins can be taken forward more towards the diagnostic aspect or more toward the therapeutic aspect?
I think therapeutic aspects, sir, as they can be used, like they regulate the signaling pathways. So inhibition of them may reduce the cancer metastasis. So, and even plectin is used as a significant target for oral cancer, sir.
All right. Finally, last question that keratin was one of the important and interesting finding, but keratin, as you know, also in the mass spectrometer based experiment is a contaminant, right? It comes from our hair, our skin, right? So
yes,
keratin, what you see in your data, is that possibility of any contamination, or is that the real biological finding?
I think it was like there were 5 classes of keratin proteins, sir. 1, 3, 5, 9, and 7. 1, 3, 5, 9, and 16. So I thought they would act as a biomarker of cancer.
No, keratin is quite known also in the context of oral cancer. My only question to you is how you can think about differentiating. Is that a contaminant coming from the sample, or is that something real biological interpretation? All right. So one way of looking at that could be that since you, when you look at data quality, right, like the number of peptides coming from those proteins, how reproducible they are across each of the sample. If it is a contamination, it may be only 1 or 2 samples. It cannot be in all 35 samples. So if they are actually showing occurrence in all the samples or most of the time, then I think that might have biological relevance and they might be a true finding. Then of course you have to look at the spectral quality, you have to look at various detail to ensure that what you see is not a contamination, especially in this context, because keratin is, as I said, quite important biologically also in oral cancer, but also it may be contamination coming from the way of handling sample, from the hair or skin or any ways of contamination in the tubes. So one need to be very cautious about these findings, and of course then next step should be to look into more new samples and try to validate these findings, right? Nevertheless, cytokeratins are known as a good biomarker. One of the proteomic scientists from India, Dr. Surekha Jingde, she had worked in ACTRAC TMH. Her lab had really worked a lot on the role of cytokeratins in oral cancer context. All right, that's all for you, Dhanush. So,
thank you, sir.
Yeah, good presentation. Now let's move on to the next one. Okay, so next is Diti Priya, and she's going to take the next topic on breast cancer. So now we are getting different flavor of some of the really challenging and most prevalent cancer of India. So just to highlight to all the students, breast cancer, cervical cancer, and oral cancer, these are the most prevalent in Indian population. And of course, breast is having the global, highest cause as well. So let's listen about this important cancer and our understanding from Diti Priya, what she is going to explain in this project.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ditipriya Mukherjee, and my proteomics project topic is global proteomics analysis of breast cancer towards identifying novel therapeutic targets. As the name suggests, breast cancer is a type of cancer which originates in the breast tissue, but it is characterized with a very aggressive invasive potential, and the tumor can metastasize to different organs in the body in a very uncontrolled manner. One of the most common symptoms of breast cancer include formation of a lump in the breast, which can be seen in the X-ray image shown here, along with bloody discharge and change in shape or texture of the breast. The treatment strategies which are used to date to treat breast cancer patients include chemotherapy, radiation, hormone-based therapy, etc. Coming to epidemiology, in India, more than 1 million cases of breast cancer are reported every day, while the worldwide scenario says that today breast cancer is the leading cause of cancer-associated deaths in women, with the survival rate ranging from 40 to 80%. So coming to my project, it was to carry out global proteomics analysis of LC-MS data of breast cancer and normal samples obtained after quantification using MaxPoint. For this, different online tools were used such as MetaboAnalyst, String, Reactome, etc. And final data interpretation was done on the basis of the previously published literature. So coming to the workflow which was used, I started with a data obtained from MaxPoint that had the proteins detected by mass spectrometer after LC-MS of disease and normal samples. This data was used as input for statistical analysis using MetaboAnalyst, gene expression analysis on Reactome, pathway analysis using Reactome and String to get a better understanding, and finally the data which was obtained upon analysis was interpreted using previously published literature to find out certain targets for therapy. So starting with MaxPoint, the proteins which were detected by the mass spectrometer were identified using their LFQ intensities on MaxPoint. This was then used to generate a p/n matrix that had nearly 1700 proteins, and it had two different clusters, namely the normal cluster or NC and the tumor cluster or TC. Each of these clusters had 7 different samples, which means that NC had 7 different samples obtained from 7 healthy individuals, while TC had samples obtained from 7 different breast cancer patients. This was the input fed to MetaboAnalyst for statistical analysis. MetaboAnalyst detected 9652 or 40.5% missing values, and thus missing value imputation had to be carried out. Missing values can be generated due to various reasons, such as problems during sample preparation or problems with the instrument, and thus missing value imputation is important. Features with greater than 30% missing values were removed, and in this case, the KNN feature-wise algorithm was used for the imputation. Features having 70% of available data were only considered for the analysis, and the remaining 30% of the missing data in these features were imputed on the basis of the available 70% data to prevent any sort of bias. After missing value imputation, data normalization was carried out in order to normalize the effects of run-to-run variation, which can be due to repeated use of the instrument leading to certain errors in calibration, etc. The data was first log transformed, and in order to align the central tendencies of the different samples, it was normalized by median. So as we can see, after normalization, the central tendencies of the different samples were all aligned. After missing value imputation and normalization, the data is now ready for statistical analysis, starting with PCA or principal component analysis. So this is a type of non-supervised clustering method which shows the variation between the two clusters, NC and TC. From the scores plot, we can see that there are 2 very distinct clusters, each having 7 different samples and no outliers. What this plot shows is that the clusters that were assigned by us actually have some biological variation in between them. After PCA, PLSDA was carried out, which is very similar to PCA, the only difference being that this is a supervised clustering method. In this case as well, a source plot was generated which showed two different clusters, each having 7 samples and no outliers. The variation in between the two components in this case was on the basis of the groups that were already assigned by us. From PLSDA, we got VIP scores. And this plot was generated. This shows the top proteins which showed the maximum variation when the two different clusters were compared. So PI3796 had the maximum VIP score, which means that it had the maximum variation in between the tumor samples and the normal samples. After PLSDA, t-test was carried out. It is a parametric test and the group variance was set as unequal and p-value threshold of 0.05 was utilized for this purpose. From this graph, we got 180 significant proteins which crossed the set p-value threshold of 0.05, but the remaining 572 proteins did not cross the set p-value threshold and were not considered for analysis. Moving on, FCA or whole gene analysis was carried out in order to understand how the proteins were being affected in between the two samples, whether they were being upregulated or downregulated. The whole gene threshold of 2 was set and the direction of comparison was tumor to healthy. From this graph, we got 227 significantly downregulated proteins, while 114 proteins were significantly upregulated in the tumor samples. The remaining 411 proteins didn't have a significant fold change value and did not cross the set threshold. Finally, accumulating the data obtained from the last 2 statistical tests, a volcano plot was generated, which took into consideration both the p-values as well as the fold change values. In this case as well, a p-value threshold of 0.05 and a fold change threshold of 2 was set. In the volcano plot, the further the proteins are from the origin, the more significant they are in respect to both their p-values as well as fold change. And thus, from this data, the top 50 proteins obtained from volcano plot were considered for further analysis on reactome and string. In order to represent the analysis carried out so far on MetaboAnalyst, a heat map was generated which considered the top 25 differentially expressed proteins. From this, very clearly we can see a group of proteins which are upregulated in breast cancer when compared to the normal samples, and another group of proteins which are downregulated in breast cancer. Moving on to pathway analysis, which was done on reactome, the top 50 proteins obtained from the volcano plot was used as input. So this tool detected the pathways in which those top differentially expressed proteins were involved. Over here as well, a p-value threshold of 0.05 was set, and the pathways which crossed the p-value threshold have been highlighted and shown in yellow. So among all the pathways which have been shown here, a major chunk of pathways have been highlighted in 3 regions, mainly homeostasis, metabolism of RNA, and extracellular matrix organization. So since the main aim of this analysis is to find out targets for therapy, I decided to go for pathways which have a lot of clinical relevance. Because extracellular matrix organization had the pathways related to ECM remodeling, ECM organization, etc. Homeostasis had pathways related to blood clotting, fibrin clot formation. On the other hand, metabolism of RNA had pathways related to mRNA splicing, etc. Moving on reactome, gene expression analysis was carried out. This also gave us a very similar diagram, but in this case, we are also getting to know how the pathways are being dysregulated. So if they are being upregulated or downregulated, the pathways which are upregulated have been shown in yellow, while the pathways which are downregulated have been highlighted in blue. So as we can see from the list of the top differentially regulated pathways, ECM proteoglycans, extracellular matrix organization, and other pathways related to ECM remodeling have been shown to be upregulated. Secondly, pathways related to blood clotting such as platelet degranulation, platelet aggregation, fibrin clot formation, etc. have been found to be upregulated as well. And finally, mRNA splicing have been shown to be downregulated from the reactome gene expression analysis. So I considered these three pathways for data interpretation, but before that, string was used to carry forward pathway analysis. The top 50 proteins obtained from volcano plot were used as input in string as well to obtain the network image shown here to see how the proteins were interacting with one another. Again, on string as well, the three pathways which were chosen for data interpretation were looked into. It was seen that 7 out of the 50 proteins which were top differentially expressed were involved in ECM remodeling, 6 were involved in blood clotting, and 9 were involved in mRNA splicing. Finally, moving on to the final stage of my presentation, that is data interpretation. So the first pathway of interest which was considered was ECM or extracellular matrix remodeling. So from reactome, we got that pathways such as degradation of extracellular matrix and ECM proteoglycans were found to be upregulated. These had proteins such as collagen, fibrins, etc. From literature, we can see that there have been articles which clearly has said that primary components of ECM are significantly changed in breast cancer when compared to the normal tissues. In breast cancer patients, there is an increase in fibrillar collagen, increase in remodeling enzymes, etc., which leads to a very significant alteration in ECM, causing invasion, metastasis, etc. Another paper has said that breast cancer leads to an increase in deposition of proteins such as collagen type 1, 3, 5, etc., all of which were found to be upregulated in our data, and thus our analysis results are in line with previously published papers. Next, blood clotting pathways such as platelet aggregation and platelet degranulation were found to be upregulated from reactome. These included proteins such as fibrinogens, etc. So again, considering previously published literature, it has been established that breast cancer patients are at a higher risk of undergoing venous thromboembolism or VTE, which is basically increase in blood clotting in venous blood. Not only that, these patients are also at a higher risk of developing other complications such as pulmonary embolism, etc. And thus, our analysis results, which clearly states that blood clotting is being increased in breast cancer patients, is in line and in agreement to previously published literature. Finally, mRNA splicing was found to be downregulated from reactome, as well as the proteins involved in these pathways and highlighted on string were found to be downregulated, and thus this can serve as a very important biomarker for breast cancer patients. So concluding and summarizing the analysis carried out so far, we started with MaxPON data, which had 1702 proteins as the input for statistical analysis on MetaboAnalyst. MetaboAnalyst gave us a list of 50 differentially expressed proteins considering both fold change and p-values. These 50 proteins were used for pathway analysis on string and reactome. Out of all the 1563 pathways detected by reactome, only the significant ones were considered for further analysis. Among the top differentially regulated pathways were ECM remodeling, blood clotting, and mRNA splicing. So, breast cancer patients, from the analysis, it was clearly shown that in breast cancer patients, there is an increase in expression of ECM altering proteins, which can lead to increase in metastasis, invasion, and proliferation, which is in line with previously published literature, and thus blocking proteins which can increase ECM degradation, leading to an increase in invasion and metastasis, can be used as a possible therapy. Blood clotting is increased in breast cancer patients, which can lead to different types of complications such as VTE, pulmonary embolism, etc. Finally, mRNA splicing aberrations can serve as important biomarker for breast cancer, since mRNA splicing proteins were found to be downregulated in the proteomics analysis which was carried out. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. These are my references. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ditipriya. I hope you are there. We can talk to you.
Yes, sir.
Good. So I think this was very interesting presentation when you gave yourself sufficient time to describe both the aspect of analysis as well as the data interpretation. Just to tell you and others that breast cancer was earlier supposed to be one disease, right? But only with the transcriptomic analysis and sequencing analysis, first time when people realized it is not one disease, it is having different subtypes, and based on all those various gene information, it was subgrouped into 4 subtypes of estrogen receptor base, progesterone receptor base, Herceptin receptor base, and triple negative. So that really led very novel ways of thinking about this cancer and the possible therapies, because everybody cannot react to the same drugs if you do not know what type of hormonal receptors they have. So definitely omics investigation have paid a lot more value to breast cancer research, and subsequently it opened up opportunity for many other cancer. Why it is important to look at even the different subtype, and I think the previous presentation also alluded at the possibility of emerging other subtypes as well. Now coming to your technical part of the data analysis, you got a lot of missing value, 40% missing value. Did you try to also look at separately how much was the missing value in control versus in the breast cancer group?
No, sir, I didn't check out the missing values in each of the different groups, but the missing value that I got from MetaboAnalyst considered the entire data.
Sometimes if missing values are high, it is a good idea to check out each group separately as well. Because what may be happening sometime that, let's say, few set of proteins are totally very low level in the control and they are very highly expressed in the disease, or vice versa, right? So in some situation, you might have some protein which are unique as well, which may not be totally missing because of the any instrument error or because of any artifacts, but rather it could be biological that, okay, those set of proteins are highly upregulated in one condition and very low in other conditions. So then you will have 50% values anyways in those cases, right?
So it might happen that some proteins are highly expressed in breast cancer and might be even missing.
That's right.
Very low in the normal.
So then in that case, you are actually arbitrarily removing those data sets, and you might be missing out some very valuable information, or you are forcibly adding some missing value on top of it, which is going to reduce the significance of those when you compare one. It's always good to also look at how unique some patterns could be. Now, I think given the context of the breast cancer, it might have been good for you to also ask your mentors who would have given you data to know about some clinical information, because again, you have made a lot of interesting biological interpretation in context of ECM remodeling and looking at mRNA splicing forms. But how relevant those will be in different subtypes of breast cancer will be different. So again, you and other presenters in future, whenever you are trying to juggle with understanding the biology of it, please feel free to ask the team and the GAs to get more information wherever it's required to know more about what is exactly possible over there. Now, finally, my last question to you is, when you did the pathway analysis, Reactome, and string and GSEA, you have tried top 50 proteins, based on your some rationale. What was the rationale using 50 proteins?
Yeah, I chose the proteins, the top 50 proteins which I got from the volcano plot obtained on MetaboAnalyst, which considered both the fold change as well as p-value. So I considered.
Why top 50? Why not the 51 protein was how low it was? How different was 50 protein in terms of p-value and in terms of fold change?
Okay, so the threshold, I had set a p-value threshold of 0.05 and a fold change threshold of.
Only 50 protein fit into p-value of 0.05? I thought more, right? Yeah, so just to cut short, because your time is up now, for the pathway analysis, it may not be a bad idea to look at much bigger number of proteins, those which are all significant, based on your t-test and p-value, and need not to make very high stringent criteria for the fold change cutoff. Because when you did the analysis, you showed maybe 7 proteins or 2 proteins or 5 proteins for the 3 important biological pathways, which are quite low if you look at the overall entity, which is mapping 200 and 150 like that, right? So you'd like to see more protein coming from your data to gain more confidence about the significance of these pathways in the biological context. So therefore, while to look at the panel of biomarker, it might be good to be stringent and have rationale. Whereas for looking at biological understanding, it may not be a bad idea to go slightly less stringent. P-value, of course, you have to keep 0.05 minimum, but at least 4 change could be considered, depending on how good you have number of proteins. Okay, all right, that's all. So it was interesting and a lot of new information obtained from breast cancer. Thank you. So let's move on to the next presenter, which will be now Piyush Kumar. He's going to talk about COVID-19. And he's going to look at the swab data set from nasopharyngeal swab of the patient samples of COVID-19, non-severe and severe, towards understanding the COVID disease, the pathogenesis, and the maybe the prognosis of the disease. So let's move on to this presentation from Piyush.
Hello everybody, I am Piyush Kumar, MTech, first year student in Biomedical Engineering at IIT Bombay. I am presenting today my project on topic Global Proteomics Analysis of COVID severe versus non-severe swab samples to decipher host response toward COVID pathogenesis. So my contents overview is, firstly we discuss biological part, then we go through data analysis, then literature review, then conclusion, and then reference. So biological part, starting with COVID-19. What is COVID-19? COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by the SARS-CoV-2 RNA virus that belongs to family Coronaviridae. First known case of COVID-19 was identified in Wuhan, China in December 2019. WHO declared it as a global pandemic on 11th of March 2020. Till 1st October 2021, there has been 23 crores 35 lakh 3,523 confirmed cases, including 47 lakh 77,503 deaths reported by WHO. Symptoms of COVID-19 are fever, cough, tiredness, loss of smell as major, and sore throat, headache as minor. COVID-19 mainly infects human upper respiratory tract, lungs, but also supposed to attack on liver, kidney, muscle, GI tract, lymph nodes, CNS, and heart. Since 2021, variants of the virus have emerged and become dominant in many countries, with the Delta, Alpha, and Beta variants becomes the most virulent. COVID-19 is spread by dust particles and fomites, while close unsafe touch between the infector and the infected person. So we have to take some preventive measures. We should maintain a safe distance from others, at least 1 meter, even if they don't appear to be sick. Always wear a mask in public places, especially indoors, and when physical social distancing is not possible. Clean hands often, use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub. Get vaccinated when your turn came with the guidance of vaccination program. Now we will discuss about swab sampling. We can take swab sampling by two means, either by naso route or oro route. Swab sampling provides a non-invasive method for PCR testing at a very high confidence rate. These are some guidelines for taking swab sampling. Use only synthetic fiber swabs with thin plastic or wire shaft that have been designed for sampling the nasopharyngeal mucosa. Tilt patient head back 70 degrees. Gently and slowly insert the shaft so that it made contact with the nasopharynx. Gently rub it and roll the swab. Slowly remove the swab while rotating it and place swab in transport tube. Now the analysis workflow. we get raw data obtained from mass spectrometry, which was pre-processed in MaxQuant software. And then this data is being analyzed in MetaboAnalyst for missing value imputation, normalization of data, and some statistical analysis were done. The data obtained in Volcanoplot is being proceeded for pathway analysis, which is done by using Reactome and string. Description of dataset. So the data I got which contains COVID non-severe versus COVID severe samples. Total I got 21 samples, in which 11 are of non-severe and 10 remaining, these are of severe patients. Number of proteins I got is total 3,749. MetaboAnalyst shows 57.7% missing values. I begin with the processing of data in MetaboAnalyst, in which we have total sample size of 21, in which 11 of non-severe and remaining 10 are of COVID severe patients. Then for this, we
I'm not sure there is some problem with the Teams right now, or I just try connecting separately again. So we'll resume back and continue for Piyush presentation on comparing severe and non-severe of COVID-19 patients.
use sample imputation, the sample size of 21, in which 11 of COVID non-severe and remaining 10 are of COVID severe patients. Then for this, we use sample imputation, that is feature-wise KNN, and filtering the missing value because if your data contains plenty of missing values, then it can cause unavoidable error in your data. So we set missing value filtering for those proteins which have more than 30% missing value are filtered. And then we normalized it by median and log transformed so that the chance of run-to-run variation becomes less. Then we go through some statistical analysis in which we starting with t-test. T-test is used to find the number of significant and insignificant protein in the sample. So from this we get 22 significant proteins and 346 insignificant proteins. After that, we do fold change analysis, which compares the absolute value of changes between two groups. From this, we got 55 upregulated proteins, 23 downregulated proteins, and 290 insignificant proteins. Then we do volcano plot. Volcano plot is more reliable because it is combination of both t-test and fold change analysis. For this, I kept some values like FC threshold is 2, p-value threshold is 0.05, and the result interpreted from this is we get 8 significantly upregulated protein and 7 significantly downregulated protein, and 353 insignificant proteins we got. After this, we do principal component analysis was done, and you can see there is no outlier in my result, but also you can clearly see there is overlapping of some proteins, which shows that patient may be having any other viral infection or go through longer hospitalization, approx more than 50 days before sampling, because it is also mentioned in some research paper. Then we do PLS-DA analysis because partial least square discriminant analysis supplies information about each samples group, and it is clearly visible. It maximizes the covariance between Y and X, not only the variance of X as it is case of PCA. Then we do VIP score because it summarizes the importance of each variable in driving the observed group separation. Then we go through heat map. Heat map is being done, which gives clear distribution of set of proteins, and it is observed that in the green header portion, the blue region is quite more in compared to non-severe patients. And then we go through correlation. As you know, for highly correlation protein, the value should be more than 0.5. So I take the range between +1 to -1, and it is clearly observed here that the red portion proteins are highly correlatable. Then we go through reactome protein analysis. I took top significant proteins from volcano plot for this. These are the top significant proteins which I got in volcano plot. And it is clear that the set of differentially expressed proteins corresponding to different pathways. Then the GSE analysis is being done, and it discloses several additional details with the changes that occur in the immune system and signaling transduction, metabolism, DNA replication, cell cycle. From reactome analysis, I got these top 10 pathways, and the area covered by this green arrow, the protein comes under this area, is matched with the literature that are already published on this topic. And then we do string analysis. String analysis, in this I choose top significant proteins of volcano plot to do this, and you can clearly see proteins and their clustering, and the visualization can be clearly seen here. And we can clearly see there are two clustering mainly happens. Cluster 1 is associated with blood clotting, and cluster 2 is associated with metabolic enzymes. Then we do literature review, evidences that matches with the workflow. First, neutrophil degranulation. Neutrophils are the most abundant leukocyte white blood cells indispensable in defending the body against invading microbes. In response to infection, neutrophils leaves the circulation and migrates towards the inflammatory focus. They contain several subsets of granules are mobilized to fuse with the cell membrane or membrane, resulting in the exocytosis or exposure of membrane proteins. In severe patients, neutrophils are significantly altered. Second is innate immune system. Innate immunity encompasses the non-specific part of immunity that are part of individual's natural biology makeup. The identified proteins are linked to alteration in the immune system, specifically via neutrophil degranulation and netosis. Netosis is programmed cell death that occurs by release of granular contents in extracellular space. Now, conclusion. So, COVID-19 prognosis is an upright challenge. So, there is a need for protein biomarkers that can recognize the level of severity of disease in earlier stage because the mortality rate is so high in severe patients. This extensive proteomics analysis unbiasedly identified many proteins which are associated with disease severity in COVID-19 cases. Proteomic technologies can aid in biomarker identification, diagnostics, and drug development in order to monitor COVID-19 pathology and investigate treatment strategies. Systems levels high throughput capabilities of proteomic technologies can yield important insights into SARS-CoV-2 biology that are urgently needed during the pandemic, and more broadly can inform coronavirus virology and host biology. Some proteins like CKAP4, GAL9, IL1RA, LILRB4, and PDL1 expressions is significantly increased as the disease symptom severity deteriorated. Many acute phase proteins like SERPINA1, SERPINA3, FCZ were upregulated in severe patients. And these are the references that I have followed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Piyush. I hope you are there. We can talk to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this was essentially about COVID-19, and you try to look for mild and severe comparison or non-severe severe comparison. First thing was based on your observation from missing value 57%, and now since you are you just heard the previous conversation with Aditya, what is your take on it? Like, what you should have looked more closely about missing values.
Sir, because my missing values is already high, that is 57.7%. So I can't go with
video on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, my missing value that I interpret is 57.7% is already high. So I can't go with higher values like 40% missing value and 50% missing values because it can, don't give more reliable result to us.
No, so that's what I'm saying. Like, just we had discussion about this part, that since you have two groups to compare, which is one is non-severe, second is severe. Yes. Did you also try to look at each group separately and see, like, are there some group which are having too much missing value, or is that something coming unique, or why we see so much, missing data?
No, missing sir, I didn't go through separate data.
Yeah, so you should also look into that part when there is a lot of missing value. Yes. And yeah, coming to, so of course you tried many things to understand the disease and brought in some pathways which are also known in the COVID-19 now. Coming to the last slide, which you had, the one last protein which you talked about, FCG, you said. Is that FCG or FGG? And what is that protein name, full form, and what could be role of that protein?
I didn't mention FCG or FIG. I think it's GAL9 or something like CKAP4 proteins.
Well, you did. I think you are in the last after serpin proteins, you mentioned about FCG protein, and that is another very interesting protein. That's why I'm asking you the question.
Sir, I have didn't in my mind. I mentioned FCG protein.
All right, that is a fibrinogen gamma chain protein, which is quite important now in the COVID-19, and so it was not CG, but it should be GG. Another thing is about serpin proteins. What are the serpin proteins and why you think they're important here?
Sir, serpin proteins are mainly protease inhibitor.
Mm-hmm.
And these are mainly helps in control several types of chemical reaction by blocking certain enzymes, and also these are associated with inflammatory responses.
And you got few of those, and are they different, or are they, what are those numbers mean? Serpin 1, serpin other
So these are
numbers.
subfamily. These are inhibitors. These are protease inhibitors protein.
So if you had to look at your data and just in the light of only serpin proteins, what next experiment can you plan?
Sir, we can go through SRM analysis to observe more proteins and came to any output that can help us to bring new technologies or new biomarkers.
So that's one way about it. Otherwise,
Yes.
you should think about a detailed investigation about first looking at all the serpin proteins, their sequences, their alignment, what kind of changes you see, are there isoforms, where there is variation, which among those are going to be taken forward as a potential therapeutic strategy. So many things can be investigated, and this is where proteomics can give us the first step lead of some fine targets, and one could then understand them better, right?
Yes, sir,
All right.
definitely.
So that's all for you now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll take the last presentation shortly, but I have to download that video from Jyoti because that video came pretty late. So I have to just take a second to download that video, then I'll be showing my PPT. So this video came just before the class time, so that brought in a lot of difficulty for us. I'm downloading right now. Just requesting all the presenters to make sure that you give us some time to be ready as well. So please do try to upload your videos one night before. In worst situation, you can inform us ahead and at least do it before 9 a.m. so that we have at least some time to download the videos and keep it ready. By the way, while that is still happening, it is a bigger file which I am downloading. Just for the next set of presenters. So for all of you, first of all, like we did, a help session on Monday for the presenters for this week, and some of the students they joined to have their queries. I'm hoping that Friday presenters will be ready with their presentations. Today, whatever we have heard so far, it looks pretty interesting. All the presenters have made a good job of explaining the disease and showing the power of these technologies so well. So we will continue on Friday as well with the remaining presentations. If anyone faces any problem in understanding or any issues, please do let us know beforehand so that we can help you out. And last minute, don't ask for anything else that, so it's better that we can help you in preparing or giving you any papers or any ways of, pointers to make your presentation effective. That's where we are available. And again, on next Monday, we will do a help session again for the next week of presenters. So again, if you are facing any problem, we will give you some time more to talk to us next week on Monday. At the end of the presentations, you are also getting an assignment form to write some of the summary of the write-ups. Please do that. That we close just before the next session. So it will be till Wednesday. So this one, today's one will be open till Friday class, and the Friday one will be open till next Wednesday. So you get sufficient time to do that assignment as well. Both presentation and assignment together is quite a bit of marks. Please make sure that the way you are doing it seriously, do it seriously. Just so that you are whatever all hard work you have done in the quizzes and the mid-sem should not get diluted just because of one activity of project. So we are there to help you out, but I think you have to be on time and do the things in such a way that we can be making use of this time in a more informative manner. So Again, if I or my team talks about a lot of application, rather than that, now right now all of you are talking about different applications. That's more informative because you are doing a project and showing how you have tried to come up with this data and this pathways and this list of proteins and what is your understanding from those. That's, I think, quite informative and shows that in a very short time with using these software and these analytical tools, you can at least investigate a lot of complex problems with quite ease. I'm sure as you go along now, you will not have any difficulty or any hindrance or hesitation even to take much bigger proteomics project, because you see how you can easily generate a lot of information from the mass spec data set. So that's the idea, that to make all of you more comfortable and give more confidence that you can do these things yourself. This is not something which is very difficult. Just I can teach you and show you, and then you can never use it. So we really wanted to make an effort that all of you can start feeling comfortable, that you can go next step and you can do these things yourself. And challenges are that we are all remote. We are still not meeting in person, but still you are able to go so far, which is quite commendable. Of course, whenever you will get time and you will visit the campus, you can look into the possibility of seeing the mass spec, or maybe running some sample on mass spec and getting more familiarity. If this thing is going to pay anything further in your career or in your research, we'll be there to help you out. All right, Jyoti, you are giving us hard time because you can see still I'm downloading your file. 230 MB have been downloaded. But each student, please make sure that you give us some time ahead of time. Otherwise it's going to waste everybody's time like this. Anyone has any specific question or any comment for me in between while we are still waiting to get the video ready? And I'm hoping also the chat is active. People should ask questions to the presenters. Please do that, because while playing the video, I can't follow your chats. So that should happen, and we are monitoring your class activities and attendance as well. So just let's make sure that you're active and participating actively in the class. All right, it's actually, we are almost over to the class time. Yeah, yes, Parth.
Yes, sir. So I had one question. So while attending Piyush's presentation, I found that when he showed the heat map correlation plot, in that the groups that were sorted as non-severe and severe showed some kind of mixing. So there were one group which was showing all green, but then the second set was showing some green and some red. So what could be that possible reason for this?
I think let Piyush take this question first. Piyush, are you there? Well, presenters should be there. Anyways, what my take will be that, given that within the severe group also, if you think about, there could be different type of possible severity, right? Some people might be coming with a diabetic or hypertension or any other severe infections, right? As compared to other group which are only because of the COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2, right? So even within those, there is quite a bit of expectation to look at separate groups or heterogeneous groups. So that's what could be possibility, but I think Piyush should have given this answer better. All right, so I'm ready now for the last presentation. Let me share my screen. We can talk to you, Parth, again at the end. So the last presenter is Jyoti Devi, and she is going to talk about pituitary adenomas. She's looking into the anterior versus posterior pituitary sample to decipher the biological alterations.
Good morning to all. My name is Jyoti, and I'm going to present you the topic global proteomics disease of.
Jyoti, your voice was very low in recording. I have the maximum here.
Samples to decipher the biological alterations. Before beginning, I would like to give a brief introduction of the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is the master gland of the body. It is a small structure in the head and is a main endocrine gland. It is known as the master gland, which produces hormones that control other glands and many body functions, including growth. Pituitary gland is divided into two main sections: the front part called anterior and the back part called posterior. The blood vessels connect the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Now the question arises, what does the pituitary gland do? The pituitary gland secretes several hormones which are known as the chemical messengers of the body. The major hormones produced by the pituitary gland are adrenocorticotropic hormones, follicle-stimulating hormones, luteinizing hormones, growth hormones, prolactin, oxytocin, ADH. These all perform their definite functions in their definite pathways. Now, what happens when the pituitary gland does not work properly? If it overproduces hormones, it is known as hyperpituitarism, or underproduce hormones called hypopituitarism. Overproduction or underproduction can affect metabolism, growth, blood pressure, sex, functions, and more. Pituitary disorders occur when pituitary gland fails to function as it normally should, likely because of the tumor, which is an abnormal function of the cells. There are two types of tumors, like functioning and non-functioning. A functioning tumor produces hormone itself, and a non-functioning tumor does not. The non-functioning tumors are more common in case of the pituitary gland. Now, the workflow which I am going to follow for my project is the raw data was analyzed by using the metabolism. Data was checked and filtered and normalized and normalization was done. A statistical analysis like whole chain t-test volcanoplot was done. Spectrum analysis and GSEA analysis was performed, and then biological significance of the data was interpreted. So now first was data checking. The data set given to me contained the anterior and posterior protein samples. There were total 10 samples, 5 of anterior pituitary and 5 of posterior pituitary. The total number of the genes of the proteins contained 4029, and it contained 0% of missing ones. So data filtering was done to identify and remove the variables that are used when modeling the data. So IQR filter was also applied to it. So I have performed the following trials where I have tried to play with the various parameters like wall chain, t-test, and volcanoplot. Various parameters like p-value threshold or wall chain values were changed. The first data was normalization was performed, the log transformation, and now here first the normalization was performed by using log transformation, and we can see that the major of the proteins were not normalized properly. But after normalization, these proteins were normalized properly, and in the right side, a box plot of the picture shows that all the proteins are normalized. So, which means that we can take these normalized data for the further analysis. Now, the cold chain analysis was done. The threshold was kept up to 2.0 and observed 0.31 proteins significantly downregulated and 1.23 proteins significantly upregulated. This analysis was made by comparing anterior versus posterior, and the top 50 proteins which showed fold chain analysis was now the next step was t-test. T-test was performed in which p-value threshold was kept 0.05, and I observed that near about 2.28 proteins were significantly up and 1901 was protein insignificant. So after t-test, I performed the volcanoplot analysis, in which volcanoplot is the most reliable. It is done because it involves both the fold chain and the p-value cut off in the t-test analysis. So in this, I observed significant and insignificant proteins, and the top 50 proteins which were identified by the volcanoplot were further analyzed or further processed. So heat map was also generated. In this, the differential expression of protein was observed by generating the heat map. Green samples were denoting as the samples of the pituitary, and red samples as the anterior pituitary. Cover Lower half of the map, which is a clear distinction in the protein, that red region is more concentrated in posterior pituitary and blue protein is more concentrated in anterior pituitary. This shows that there is a differential expression of the proteins. On the top of the heat map, a dendrogram was also given, which shows that the clustering has been done and how these proteins falls in the same category and interact with each other. So again, a heat map was generated in which top 50, top 25 proteins were plotted against each other, and it shows majority of the protein was low expressed in case of posterior anterior pituitary. So next, principal component analysis was done, which shows that red was the interior protein and green was the posterior protein, and these are two separate proteins which interact with themselves. A score plot was also showed, which showed a PC1 of 63.6% and PC2 of 15.4%. The lower map 3D was also shown, which shows that protein in the anterior pituitary interact with each other, and in the green part, the proteins interact with each other in the posterior part. Then the partial least square discrimination analysis was also performed. It is similar to as PCA, but here it shows the similar values of component 1 and component 2, but another important aspect of PLSDA is PIP scores, which shows that, for example, we take a protein of the first protein, which is P08138, and it shows that this protein is highly variable in the posterior pituitary than the anterior pituitary. So after this reactome analysis pathway was done, all the proteins which were analyzed by the Volcano plot was taken further. It was shown that major proteins fall in the pathway like cell cycle, DNA replication, metabolism of RNA, immune system, signal transduction, and disease, etc. were also matched with this set of proteins. So the Volcano plot proteins were further analyzed for gene expression analysis, which shows that the topmost relevant pathway was sorted by p-value of 1. From this data file, it was observed that following proteins were upregulated and the following proteins were downregulated. When the UniProt IDs were searched in the UniProt or UniProt, it shows that these proteins majorly falls in the signaling pathways in the diseases. So when further analysis was carried out, it was found that these proteins all plays a major role in signal transduction in case of disease, and various pathways include were in case of cancers, like signaling of EGFR in cancer, then signaling of PDGFR in disease, WNT pathway in cancer. Another signaling pathway was ALK in cancer. Then Notch1 pathway was also included in all these signaling transaction in case of diseases. But then I saw, then according to my choice, I chose a pathway of EGFR, epidermal growth factor, signal transduction pathway, which plays a major role in pituitary cancer. When I found a literature review, it was found that this EGFR is a receptor which interacts with a variety of other molecules and proteins, and this leads to the further activation of the proteins, which helps in cell proliferation in various of the cancers pathway. Like EPGF have prevailed important protein important role in promoting self-proliferation, opposing apoptosis. So several EPGF has been introduced in pituitary oncogenesis. So what happens here, the EGF receptor, when binds to the EGF growth factor, it leads to the signaling in cell signaling, uh, uh, production of various cyclins, CDKs, and all this lead to the production of RAS, RAF, MEC, ER, and MAP pathway. The EGF activation pathway leads to the receptor diversion and transphosphorylation. As a result of this, it leads to the cascade of the protein expression. So when I performed the string analysis, the EGF growth factor itself act as a ligand, and EGF growth factor of other protein, EGF growth factor receptor can bind to the various ligands. So the non-ligands include like amphiregulin, apigen, beta-cellulin, heparin binding EGF, and EGF. So these ligand binding triggers receptors, homo and heterodimerization and autophosphorylation of the key cytoplasmic residues. The phosphorylated receptors recruits adapter molecules like GRB2, which in turn activates complex downstream signaling cascades. So I found a literature review in which I found that this EGFR receptor plays a major role in pituitary corticotroph adenomas, and it has a relationship with the tumor behavior. So what I found that this EPGF has been found to localize in several human mucoplasmas and have a significant correlation with adenomyosis and patient progenesis. EGFR is overexpressed in pituitary corticotroph adenomas. So the purpose of this study was to identify the expression patterns of EGFR and its downstream signaling pathways molecules in pituitary corticotroph adenomas, and to investigate the association of this EGFR with pathological characteristics and tumor recurrence in case of the pituitary gland. So the GFR was overexpressed like 55% in pituitary corticotroph adenomas. The expression degree was significantly higher in pituitary rather than non-pituitary adenomas. In EGFR overexpressing adenomas, the downstreaming pathway like PERK and other PGFR, they were significantly activated. And the expression level of EGFR was also seen in all these things. So it shows that in recurrent group, or the persons having this pituitary adenomas have high level of expression of EGFR receptor rather than non-recurrent group. So the overall conclusion of the study was that EGFR could be used as a promising biomarker for predicting pituitary corticotroph and tumor recurrence in the coming time. So other potential use was that like molecules, various molecules like ERBB, TKIs, and trastuzumab, cetuximab, and certain TKIs like erlotinib, which is only specific for EGRF, has been broadly used and inhibit other receptors in the family. Inhibitors to molecules downstream of ERBB signaling pathways such as SRC, AKT, Survivin, or mTOR are also potential therapeutics for these signaling pathways, and can plays a major role in EGF also, and it can be a major role for potential therapeutic in the upcoming time. So this was all about me, and thank you.
All right, Jyoti, you are there. So mainly this project was essentially about comparing anterior and posterior regions of pituitary. Can we talk to you, Jyoti, now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So can you first explain that why it is important to study comparing these two regions, anterior and posterior of pituitary?
So, because anterior and posterior pituitary is the master gland, because it secretes a variety of hormones through anterior pituitary, and through posterior pituitary, it helps in nerve transduction or signaling pathways. So, if we study this pituitary gland, or if it is malfunctioning, if we are able to figure it out, so we can find the various pathways which can be treated to which can be act as a cure to other diseases in this kind of in pituitary. Like there are the cases of cancers in pituitary, but these are very less studied. So if we know the pathway which is leading to those kind of cancer, so we can figure out a potential drug target or a pathway which can prevent it for going to the oncogenesis or something like that.
All right. See, I think in this particular case, looking at anterior and posterior pituitary, idea was to make some sort of baseline reference map of these protein, which are highly enriched either in anterior or posterior, so that eventually one could utilize this information to compare any disease expression. Because once you know what is the normal pituitary, their level of these proteins in anterior or posterior, then one could look into the context of disease as well, that what happens to the expression of the protein in disease state. But here in this case was essentially to capture the diversity of these two regions. And while you came up with the EGFR signaling, right, and ERBB2 pathway, that's one of the major pathways coming from your study. Did you find them more in anterior region or posterior region, and why you think? Because your original context was not to compare the disease or to look at adenocarcinomas or looking at pituitary adenomas, but rather you have to focus into understanding why anterior is different than posterior. So therefore, what is your understanding of role of EGFR signaling or the receptors and their differentiation in anterior or posterior?
So when I plotted the volcano plot, I got top proteins. When I carried out the reactome analysis of that, I got the different pathways, like various pathway like neutrophil degranulation, cell signaling, mRNA splicing. So these were a lot of pathways which I was getting. But when I saw the one of the major hits which are corresponding to this pathways, it was like one was of signaling.
To cut short, idea here was, as I said, to understand better about both these regions, right? Which kind of signaling is governed from these anterior or posterior. So a better strategy could have been that one was looking at, while looking at your heat map, you know that which regions are high in the anterior, which ones are high in the posterior, right? So you make the separate pathway maps. Which of these proteins are highly in the anterior and they belong to which pathways, and which of the proteins are highly in the posterior and which of the pathways they are governing. So then that can probably lead us to better understanding of the regions and why they are diverse and which type of signaling cascade they might be driving to, right? All right, so that's all for you and all the presenters today. So we got slightly late due to some technical issues and delayed videos, but finally we are able to hear some very nice presentations today. So thank you all the presenters and all the students. We will be joining you back on the next presentation on Friday. Thank you.